if it's general, it's fine. But if you're gonna have examples of various kinds, I'm happy to take it, but I would also need some kind of assistance just to verify that if it's the right thing to put it there or not.
Got it. Yeah, and it's understandable. I mean, nobody can understand everything in the project at all times, especially at this scale. But yeah, if you want to take ownership of that issue, I could see a big value in engaging with SIG Storage and seeing if you could find some stakeholders from SIG Storage to help you with this. And then obviously, if there's any help needed from a SIG Docs or documentation placement help or anything like that, the SIG Docs Slack channel, these meetings here, we can definitely talk about this a little further. But I think a good direction would be to start in the Docs tasks area, as Steve recommended, and then pairing up with someone from SIG Storage to see that to completion.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
So we got Zach back. I'll kick it back to you to our on hold for technical difficulties.
Thank you. Just as a side note, I'm going to put an additional issue at the end to discuss what happens when inevitably I get kicked out of meetings. Technical discussion for what happens if a chair, quote, vanishes. Okay, so I'm just going to start over because I don't know where I disappeared in that particular moment. So for background, we had discussed and implemented a policy for handling third-party content in the docs. It was a sort of a stab in the dark, and when the steering committee discovered the policy that we had made, they reacted very strongly to it and said, no, the impact, the range of shareholders, the range of stakeholders in this is too large. The scope of proposed changes is too large, and the changes are not adequately defined to meet the bar for collaboration. So walk this policy back and submit a KEP instead, a Kubernetes enhancement proposal. So that's where we are now. The steering committee meeting is tomorrow morning at, look at my calendar really quick. Excuse me, it's tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Pacific. I'm happy to get an invitation for anyone who would like to attend, but I suspect that is the feedback, and what will emerge as a proposal to go forward is to put a hold on any PRs coming from this umbrella issue 15748 to produce a KEP and to make sure that it's adequately reviewed and go forward from there. And I think that's all valid. I think especially the feedback that we need to be more broadly collaborative than we are is valid. There's really no one to blame for that but me. This was my initiative to take on. I'm the one who drove this policy. So I think that the policy is good. I think the manner in which I pushed it forward needs to be more collaborative. So I can't fault the steering committee on asking us to pause it and walk it back. To that, I can only plead that Jim is new, Jared was gone and then ultimately moved on. Jennifer was unavailable for a very long time. So I was one person stretched between three people. It's one person stretched over a three-person job. So I can only put my own inward focus as a result of having too much to do and not enough resources to do it. That's not an excuse.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to do something like this to get people's attention. So if you want to look at the glass being half full as opposed to half empty, sometimes you got to shake a tree, and you shook a tree, and now you're actually getting on their committee, on getting on their agenda, and so the end result's not so bad.
It's really not. I view this for docs as an unqualified win because it means that we now have the stakeholder attention on the question of third-party content.
Very nice.
But I do want to affirm that I have pushed back with the steering committee about how they responded to that issue. It doesn't matter how right they are, if they're, how to put this diplomatically, it's not okay to, it's great to be right. It's not okay to be a jerk about being right.
Absolutely.
So I have pushed back. I will push back on that.
Sure.
So I want to thank Amy for being willing to tackle a tough topic and also affirm that you were not treated well, and I will ensure that you are treated well going forward.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that part, Amy, so I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, it happens. Consider where I worked prior to this job.
Right. But it doesn't happen here. And when it does,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we take a pretty strong stand on such things. We
Yeah.
very, very much want a wonderful working environment. And when things like that happen, we do appreciate Zach standing up for us and saying, no, you're not going to do this, no matter how right you are.
Yeah.
So very cool.
And Jim and Jennifer stand up for us as well. And you don't have to be a chair to stand up for others. We can all stand up and keep this place the excellent place that it is to collaborate. So, Jim, you had asked a question about whether there was a KEP already in process. I have not started on one. Tim Bannister, SF Tim, asked the same question yesterday. I said if he wanted to get started on one, that's great. I have been waiting to hear specific feedback from the steering committee tomorrow about going forward. But I don't think I think it's possible to start on the bones of a KEP now. But I also didn't want to act unilaterally in the formation of a KEP. So I guess there's an open question about how to put that together. Is that something that we want to do collectively? Is that something that we want to task either one person or a small group with and then come back? What are folks' thoughts?
In my limited experience seeing some of these KEPs getting drafted, it seemed like a good approach would be a Google Doc collaboratively, and then having a PR for more of the wider feedback from the KEP. But that's like the one or two KEPs I've seen go from work in progress to being an actual KEP.
Yeah, and I share the same experience. I'd be happy to collaborate with Tim on a Google Doc and shape it into an official KEP.
Me as well, Brad. Happy to participate on a Google Doc.
I'm interested to see what it's going to look like, because when I looked at the KEP form, most of it wasn't even relevant to documentation.
Right.
What we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's yeah, you're correct in that the KEP is very sort of coding centric, but
right, but the process that they're trying to do, which is a multi-round vetting and feedback loop, it's going to provide that mechanism, even though you'll look at half the parts on the form and go, well, that doesn't apply, that doesn't apply, that doesn't apply. So, but it'll give them an opportunity to do what they want to do, which is obviously do an iterative vetting.
Cool. So that sounds good to me. Let's see. I would be happy Well, let me walk that back. Uh, Jay, Brad, Jim. Actually, Jim, would you be willing to open to create the Google Doc that we use to start that discussion?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool, thank you. And let's see. And so far, I have Jay, Brad, Amy, myself, and Tim Bannister as folks who are interested on that. It's not a last call. I mean, folks can join in later, but for now, for getting it started, anyone else interested in that process?
And it sounds like, you know, what Jordan Liggett and some other folks were asking is just basically take what was merged, right, for the content guide that Amy shepherded through and that we backed off, and just put that into a Google Doc, kind of shape it into a CAP and submit that as a CAP. So we shouldn't overthink things and try and like redo it, or
Yeah, there's no need to invent fire here.
right.
Okay. The second part of that is, so Jordan Liggett proposed that we either revert a particular commit or that we add a draft notice to the third-party content. I think that's a good idea, but I'm going to ask that we defer action on that until after we get the chance to talk with the steering committee. So if that's the case, Amy, I will work with you to to implement whatever comes out of that steering committee discussion. Are there other questions about this? Other feedback? How are folks? How are you thinking? How are you feeling? Talk to me.
I would really, really like to attend the steering committee meeting tomorrow. Unfortunately, I'm like quadruple booked for that time slot. So I'll just trust you guys to represent me. I mean, I pretty much made my big points, my big priorities known in the original 15748 PR. So, or not 15748, whatever the 15892. So yeah, I'll let you deal with that, and I'll watch the recording afterwards.
Cool, thank you, Jay. Other folks?
Yeah, just for everyone to be aware. I mean, sometimes when you go in front of the steering committee, you know, there are things that can happen that are very frustrating. Things can take too long to get reviewed, or you thought you had consensus, then you don't. You know, things like that can happen, and so just you know, everybody understand. So always could be a rough ride. So hopefully, just have a thick skin. Don't take it personally. It's one of these things that can be a little bit challenging, I think. And just you know, I mean, I've had to do more on the architecture board side than the steering committee, but I assume, you know, the same uh, hey, you know, look out, advisory still applies.
I just want to add, I put a link in the agenda there, and I can also throw it in chat for the initial draft. I just straight up took the template, dumped it in Google Docs. I figured we're going to have someone eventually take some of the information and distill it down into Markdown and all that fun stuff eventually, but there it is.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And thank you, Brad. That's good advice. Any more feedback? Okay. Well, let's move on. So let's talk about The Case of the Vanishing Chair, a Sherlock Holmes mystery. So this keeps happening to me, like almost by clockwork, like 15 minutes into a meeting, and it turns out it's a router issue. I have to restart my router, but that doesn't look like it's going to fix itself anytime soon. So I wonder if I'm the best person to continue being the host. Eric Hardy says mobile phone. That would be great if I didn't live in a historic restoration with really thick brick walls and no cell signal.
Wow. Is it always the same time of day, or is it just?
I think the poor thing gets a little overworked. I think it's used to having a nice, steady security blanket of. I run a ping window in every laptop I have open, every active session, and I think it gets used to having a nice, TCP security blanket to help it cope with its life. And because this is usually the first thing I do on a Tuesday, I suspect there's a large enough number of port collisions that the router just goes up and out.
This is your own personal wireless router, is it? Right?
It's the one that TELUS provides me, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Alternatively, I could just walk the 2 blocks to my co-working space, which is maybe a better solution than trying to do the complicated sort of handshake dance of getting another person to be the host and do the video. So for now, I will start going to my co-working space, but in the event that a chair drops for whatever reason, the host will pass, I think, to the next, whoever the host becomes in the meeting. I would ask that if you suddenly become the host, resume recording the meeting, so that way we continue to get coverage. All right. So go for it, Jim.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that, to entirely rely on you or any individual to be the sole chair, I think is a hard model to scale or move forward long term. One of the reasons I'm withholding just straight up volunteering to say, I'll be a sit-in for, hosting these meetings here on now, is my work schedule just really is variant depending on, what day it is. I know it's the same time for us every week, but my meetings change. But it would be good to have almost like a rotating seat or maybe a monthly duty, almost kind of like PR wrangler, but maybe a little less formal even. Just getting folks more experience to sitting in the hot seat and then running the meetings and a little bit more involvement there. I think that'd be a good thing.
I agree. It's not especially onerous. It's honestly pretty straightforward. I mean, you have to enter 1 6-digit code and click one record button and record to the cloud. Yeah, Jim. I mean, I think you accurately point out that it's the way that things are now is not a scalable solution. So I've got a meeting with Paris Pittman after this. Let me talk with her and see if there are best practices that other SIGs use for running meetings, and we can take a look at iterating from there. But I do like your idea about making sure that how to run a meeting, like the actual mechanics of it, isn't domain knowledge. There's no reason for it to be so highly specialized. Okay, that's all that we have for the agenda. Is there anything else that folks would like to talk about in the time we have left?
This is Eric. I just had a question regarding translations. I don't know if there's a cadence to be able to refer to which English version the translation was done for. I saw a feature request for being able to kind of tie those two together, and I thought that was a good idea, especially as we, make updates and newer versions come out. It'd be nice to also have some sort of way of keeping track of that.
So far we've left up the cadence of which release a team works on to the individual team. And I think like different teams are in different places. Is there a specific issue that you can point to, Eric?
I'll try to see if I can find it, but it was specifically for translations. So somebody was trying to help with some translations, I think. I forget which language, but then they didn't know which version it had, last translated for. And so
gotcha.
they didn't know how to go about seeing which parts they should focus on, besides just reading through it all and comparing it, I guess, to the active one. And then for the future, and making the pull requests, maybe being able to specify, kind of like the snapshot of the English version that it was referred to.
That's a really good question. Yeah, because right now there's no hard guidance that we provide. I think we're basically assuming that folks will look at the content tree, start with whatever version seems to work best for them. It's usually the last stable release. So with 1.16 out, if somebody came in and wanted to start localizing docs, I think we would recommend that they start at 1.15 because that's the last stable release, or the most recent stable release. But that's not specified anywhere, and maybe that could be.
Okay, sure. If you want, I can maybe try to help, fill in this part, because I was actually thinking about helping with some translations. So I'll try to dig up the feature request, and then I'll try to put something together for the next meeting to just follow up on it.
Great. And if you find that feature request, will you send it to me in Slack?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Okay. Anything else?
Hey, Zach, I meant to pop in before, but I had trouble finding my unmute. I can host the meetings if that's going to help out in the short term until we figure out something better. My internet connection has been pretty stable lately.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy, for being willing to step up and do that. Yeah, we can talk about we can talk about how to onboard you for that. It is pretty
I can't imagine it shouldn't be any different than when I was the Docs PTO, hosting meetings.
Cool. Okay. Anything else?
Eric asked a question in the chat about, he was wondering if SIG apps manages the Kubernetes examples.
Oh, I think those examples, Jim, you probably know better than I do.
Which examples?
Yeah, so I guess that's a better question for Eric. Which examples are you thinking of, Eric?
I'm thinking they might be the ones that were linked earlier in the agenda. I don't want to speak for Eric if he's there.
Yeah, I think he typed that in when we were talking about the tutorials section of the website, where the actual code, there's a Kubernetes repository for the code, a separate Kubernetes repository, and that README says, look in the documentation for how to use these.
Oh, interesting.
Just looking at the. Sorry.
That's actually a question we probably need to answer, because the tutorials seem to become outdated rather quickly. And it would be nice to know who owns those examples.
So the owning of those examples is a problem, because I just glancing through what they are, I remember, I can remember a certain person who wrote, Cassandra, or, another one. And I know now that, that person is in a completely different group doing, and probably paying no attention. So that, I think that tends to be the fate of these things. They get done once, and in most cases, I don't think anyone's paying attention.
So I'm sorry, I was absent for that part of the discussion. So let's see. To the specific question from Eric, does SIG apps handle or manage the K8s examples? Probably not. And it looks like, just trying to sum up the discussion, Steve, you recommend that, can you, when you say that you recommend that they should be a set of tasks, do you mean the tutorials in particular? Or can you say more about that?
So yeah, two different things. One was the issue about persistent volumes and persistent volume claims. That one looked to me like it could be addressed by writing a set of tasks. Then there's this other concern about what's up with this GitHub Kubernetes / examples repository. So there we have the source code for several large examples, larger than what we would put in a task topic. So those have become tutorial topics. That's the tougher question, because someone who's a developer, not more likely a developer than a writer, would write these large examples, and then I think they, I don't want to I don't want to speak too strongly here, but I think some of them, they don't get looked at very often, and then so we as writers, have to think, well, what do we do with these things? They've gotten out of date, and who's responsible for keeping the tutorial in the docs up to date with the changes that do get made to the source code in the repository, and that's just all very fuzzy.
Okay. So I see an action item here for Savita to take points alongside engaging SIG storage for assistance. Is that specifically around pointing docs to examples in K/examples? Say more about that, Savita, if you would, please.
It's specifically related to the PV and PVC example.
Gotcha,
But
thank
it's
you.
a good question that if we should link or unlink both. So I am a platform developer, so I go to all possible places to get some information. My first place would be to look in the documentation site, but I have known about this site examples because I've used it in the past. So that means other place that I would go and look into. So that's why I brought it up. That should be have some kind of link, or and that also brings up the question that Steve mentioned, that who would maintain it.
That is thank you for the clarity, Savita. So how to deal with example content? Steve, you're right, that is a larger question. I would like to come back to it next week at the top of the agenda when we're all fresh. And give us a week to think about it. Yeah, come back to this as a fresher topic where we can give it more attention. So let's revisit on 10/8 at top of agenda. Is that acceptable to you, Steve?
Yeah.
If we defer for a week.
Yeah, and just one quick comment we can think about in the meantime. We don't have that many tutorials, so we could take it upon ourselves to test them. we could sign up to go through the tutorial and see if it still works, or see if it's somehow out of date.
Awesome. All right. I think that's an excellent idea. Okay, last call to discuss. All right, thanks everyone. That's a SIG meeting. Take care, have a good week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Do